Post-war refers to the idea of abolishing or distributing work in order to accomplish democratic ideals such as equality and freedom. It suggests a future in which work is no longer necessary because of our stable wealth levels, in which all citizens either work the same amount of hours to a similar level of satisfaction or don't need to work at all in order to subsist. This post-work utopia posits a future in which people live collaboratively, interact more creatively, and engage in a value basis that is not primarily competitive or for financial profit. In relation to this future, a small range of existing publics may already embody post-work values. For example, digital nomads or people with flexible contracts allow them to work remotely, independently, and in control of their working hours. Also, egalitarian communities or cooperatives, or people who abandon corporate life. In its towards dystopia, people that completely depend on platforms such as Deliveroo or Uber to survive. The design proposal for the project as conclusion of my research was to create an assembly. Assemblies are by definition the coming together of different persons enacting a political choreography that manifests a form of collectivity. By facilitating the coming together of a group of people as an articulation of their dissatisfaction with the working system, we construct a mobilized and resistant population to the abusive economic models that we have come to believe in. It is important to note that this assembly is not a focus group or any form of ethnography, but a performance of a set of values and principles that inform the type of society we would like to live in. The objective of this assembly is not to generate insights on what participants think of work, but the performance of such society by enacting new social forms. The first design included a bamboo structure and a decorative planter as a venue for the assembly, an audio piece that would introduce and guide the topic of discussion, a set of questions in paper rolls that help participants reflect on their own work situations, a value exchange in which participants share a valuable activity, a set of conversation topics for discussion. In an intervention in Regent's Park, I interviewed a series of randomly selected people with the objective of testing the topics of conversations and finding out about what issues of work interest the possible participants of the assembly. Here are some clips of the intervention.
I think they would enjoy it in the beginning because it's new, having that time. But I think after a while you'll find that they really want some kind of structure to your life, and a lot of times work does that. But I think as long as it doesn't take over your life, I think work is good at giving you structure.
Do you structure your own time, or do other people structure your time for you?
I think I'm learning to structure my own time, but a lot of times work plays a big part of it. But I mean, I think you have to learn to control it.
Out of this intervention, a set of questions and topics started to shape, aiming to engage participants on the topic at different scales. On the personal level, talking about what issues affect them directly, on the population's experience of work, and what can be done to make small improvements to work. This informed the creation of a central poster for the venue that would help guide the conversation and engage the participants, substituting the audio piece that I introduced in the first design. Later in the project, I did a full run of the assembly to test the structure and the venue in order to evaluate my facilitation of the assembly. Students that participated had previous work experience and contact with the labor market, as well as a common objective in generating their own independent creative practice. The evaluation of the assembly generated the following insights. When asking participants to share a valuable activity they do and they enjoy, most participants resulted to talk about food, which created the sense that the conversation wasn't being completely natural. This was against my expectation that the participants would engage in a more active exchange. In future iterations, this part of the assembly will be about introducing ourselves and the host presenting the objective of the assembly. Sitting on the floor for prolonged periods of time provoked discomfort as I started to look for surfaces in which to lean. More active ways of conversation will be explored in the future, for example, by doing a manual activity while the conversation happens. The food as a central element of the assembly that would help them relax and start opening up wasn't necessarily paid attention to. This element will be maintained as an enhancer of comfort, but it won't be emphasized. The conversation turned into more of a lecture in which I made several long interventions to introduce different topics. My aim was to engage students in the conversation and help them voice their opinions on the issues, but such thing didn't happen. The conversation did not feel lively or engaging for them, and in the future the questions will need to focus more on the participants and less on their impressions of a larger scale issue. During the degree show, I engaged in several conversations. One of the groups wanted to participate in an assembly as they found interest in the set of steps that were printed on the poster. I tried to guide the conversation by following these steps and trying to extract their point of view in possible ways in which they could actively improve their work situation. The participants were both Australian and worked in a company that functions as a sort of Skillshare platform in a similar way to a time bank. Although the series of steps seemed like a good idea to provide some sort of structure to the conversation, this ended up feeling a bit more like an interview and not so much like a fluent conversation. In future iterations, the dramaturgy of the assembly will be reviewed. This iteration of the assembly will focus on how can the design be tested, evaluated, and iterated forward. My approach to creating a public consisted on generating a common task or objective for the group to do, and identifying a series of shared values inspired by past work that the participants have in common. Facilitating a determined social format that nurtures such values and forms as a vehicle to speculate about our desired future. In this sense, I also chose a location that links the task with the values in order to articulate social issues and the formation of social bonds between the participants. The participants were recruited at Parliament Hill. I focus on the young individuals that feel dissatisfied with their careers and that are somewhat victims of the precariousness of the job market. I arrived at Parliament Hill and started building the bamboo structure, aiming to attract the desired group of participants. When they showed interest in what was going on, I approached them and asked them whether they would like to join. I invited them to learn how to tie knots and lash bamboo poles together by drawing the parallelism with the film Melancholia, in which a family prepares for the end of the world by building a fort that will protect them from a planet crashing the Earth. The location of Parliament Hill was chosen because it shows the corporate buildings of London in the background, suggesting it is our work that is going to crash us. In participating in the creation of the structure, I tried to make participants necessary for the assembly, providing them with a sense of ownership and collectivity. In this way, I introduced the topic and invited them to talk about their own work experiences and their views on job precariousness, the gig economy, the gender pay gap, and the flexibility at work. I evaluated what happened by using video analysis of the film of The Gathering and the feedback from the participants on a written form. The video analysis concentrated particularly on participants' use of space, the selected quotes from conversations, and microanalysis of high and low points of the experience. Some of the main takeaways from the experience were: participants develop a sense of ownership by being part of the construction of the structure. This was illustrated by them showing each other how to tie the knots and explaining to new participants what the experience was about when I couldn't talk with other people that were interested. This sense of ownership will be enhanced in future iterations by allowing them for more personalization and decoration of the space. The structure attracts a very varied group of people. On the day, 18 people asked to join the assembly and 3 helped build the structure. Out of all of the participants, 5 of them were within the expected public of a young individual that feels dissatisfied with their career. Amongst these were a CNN reporter, an academic publisher, a team member in higher education quality assurance, a policeman, and a policymaker. Their dissatisfaction was identified in the feedback forms and in the video analysis. For example,
I mean, you and I were having this conversation just the other day, weren't we? Yeah.
What do you want to do when you were...
No, just about how we're kind of at a moment in our lives where we feel like, we're just living for the weekend.
But you seem to be doing it well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
where we are.
Feeling trapped, right?
Yeah, it's like, you have these ideas.
Over.
And you're just like, oh my god, this is it.
That's it.
It was also identified in the forms when they say, I felt it was nice to use my hands and be outdoors. I enjoyed contributing to something larger than myself. And lots of people want to learn something new and complete a fulfilling task. The sense of participants feeling the safe with how work turned out to be will be enhanced by the use of reminiscence and nostalgia within the language of the assembly. For example, the signs could read, "Help me build a fort," in reference to how children play. All the participants that attended the assembly during the day expressed how they wanted to meet with a similar group of people in the future. This can be seen in the forums. This signals that the social format of the gathering was appropriate. Many people expressed how the most engaging part of the experience was learning how to tie knots and the thought-provoking conversations. Here are some examples from the forums. Some people took pictures of the structure when a sign was installed, inviting them with the sentence, "Let's talk about work." It would be interesting in the future to see if adding social media handles to the posters would help online communities grow. Several curious persons ask about a website with more information. Next time they will be pointed at social media channels with more information about the project, and I will also have postcards that explain more about the project. In the feedback, all participants pointed at other parks where the experience would ideally take place. This signals that the location was adequate, and in this regard the experience will take place in a different park in next iteration. An interesting observation from the feedback is how the conversations were fluent and people felt at ease in sharing their stories. They might have been encouraged by the strategy employed in helping them voice their concerns. I paraphrased the content of their speech, expanding on it with concepts of my research, which then invited them to continue to talk about the topic. This is known in dramaturgy as a yes and strategy. When planning the second iteration of the assembly, I encountered a problem. In the recruitment part of the experience, I created a Facebook event and an Instagram account to promote and engage online communities in the activity. Because the identified public out of iteration 3 was a number of young participants, I identified a young creative area like Victoria Park for the activity to take place. As I shared the event on the Facebook group Victoria Park Friends that has more than 5,000 members, one of the members commented on the post suggesting that the activity was illegal and that I needed to ask for permission to the council for hosting a public event and building a structure in the park. I then contacted Tower Hamlets Council, and the response is that I needed to ask for a permit with a form that would take them 28 days to approve and gather a set of requirements. This would make the activity impossible to do within the time frame, and too many people were aware of the happening, for which I cancelled the event and I decided to do it in a different park without permission. I then headed to Richmond Park and started to set up the assembly. Because of the different demographic that attends the park and the nature of the signs inviting people to build a fort, I engaged mainly with families with kids in the experience. The construction happened mainly with a family with 2 kids that helped me build the fort. The conversation with the kids focused around what they wanted to do when they grew up and speaking with the parents about the issues with work and about their visions in relation to how they thought it would turn out for the kids. In the feedback, the parents stated how the activity was engaging by saying, "Interesting people, great things for boys to join in with." Shortly after having built the fort, the park warden and the security came to inform me that the activity was in violation of the park bylaws because it was forbidden to hold public conversations in parks. In consequence, I was asked to unbuild the structure and abandon the park. The main takeaways of this iteration were: the signage with a nostalgia element tends to attract families and children rather than adults. Emphasis will be placed on the topic of work. The recruitment through social media could have been successful. In that regard, it would be enhanced by requesting the required permits to hold the event in the appropriate location. The decorative elements provide little control over the final aesthetic of the venue. Furthermore, the enclosed aesthetic detracts people from wanting to join, for which a more open decorative element needs to be provided. The space needs to be more virtual. Testing has happened by doing the assembly from start to finish in different locations and exploring different social formats and materials. The project has proven to be successful by engaging specific publics in the creation of an assembly that attempts to divulge principles of equality and freedom. Some questions remain open in regards to the formalization of these conversations into more durable political structures in order to guarantee the security and fidelity of the public engaged. On the other hand, the issues with the use of public space and how our social regulations impede collective organization in the public space can be investigated further. It would be interesting to explore more how the privatization of public space difficults our social and political assembly, but also the values that conflict in this case. As reflected in the participant feedback, the conversation is stimulating and engaging, which potentially is a good way forward into educating the public in questioning our economic policies and social structures. Further work could be done in how this could scale up and translate into an open format that invites communities to use their own materials and visual languages to shape other emergent assemblies. At this stage, the role of the designer proves to be essential. The principal role has been of the facilitation by ensuring the coming together of people, articulating issues by design, and supporting the community with the use of social and physical materials and expertise. This project expands on the practice of industrial design by creating new fields of action and engaging in the creation of policy in a different way. Up until now, design has informed policy in a direct way, by serving as ears and translators to communicate with the political class. This approach aims at doing politics in everyday life and awakening the population into shaping policy with their own bodies. This perspective has taken me to develop a deeper understanding of our politics, as well as created an objective in my career to explore forms of social advocacy and activism. This practice complements the theory by enabling dialogue and using design for public and social design methodologies.